viewers, it's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. We begin at home as the presidency over the weekend picked holes in recent remarks by outgoing president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, that Nigerians today were worse off than they were at independence in 1960. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga, in a formal reaction of the presidency on Sunday night to Adesina's submission, described his position as based on inaccurate data and a narrow assessment of Nigeria's economic evolution. Adesina had, while speaking at a recent event, reportedly cited figures sourced from Nairametrics suggesting that Nigeria's GDP per capita was $1,847 in 1960 compared to $824 today. Quoting official statistics, Onanuga outlined Nigeria's economic growth over the decades, acknowledging a rise in GDP to $12.55 billion in 1970, $27.7 billion in 1975, $64.2 billion in 1980, and $164 billion in 1981. He added that per capita income remained under $880 until 1980 and peaked at $3,200 in 2014 after GDP rebasing. According to the presidential spokesperson, GDP per capita alone is an inadequate measure of citizens' well-being. While still on the economy, the federal government has pledged its commitment towards the actualization of the $3 billion Age Deep Seaport project to promote job creation, economic development, and attract local and foreign investments to the Niger Delta region. The Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, Adegboyega Oyetola, stated this at the weekend during the flag-off of the marine safety sensitization and distribution of life jackets to waterway users in Yenagoa, Bayelsa State. The minister said the realization of the Age Seaport project in Bayelsa State was part of President Bola Tinubu's administration's alignment with a broader marine and blue economy vision, which is part of its transformative agenda to revive the economy. While commending the Bayelsa State Governor, Senator Doyo Diri, for his initiatives and his administration's alignment with the broader marine and blue economy vision of the federal government, he added that the port will also open up new frontiers in logistics, fisheries, shipbuilding, and tourism. Now to power issues, as the federal government vows to urgently address the 4 trillion naira debt crippling Nigeria's power generation sector. The move aims to avert an imminent collapse of power infrastructure in the country. Now, at a meeting in Abuja, Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu assured the chairman of Generating Companies of Nigeria, GENCOs, that the government would prioritize immediate payment of a significant amount of the debt. The balance would be defrayed through other debt instruments. He said this would be proposed in a meeting being planned between President Bola Tinubu and the GENCO's leadership. Adelabu acknowledged the government's role in the sector's struggles, pledging to not only clear the debt, but also implement reforms to ease operational bottlenecks. And finally, the late Afenifere leader, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, has been buried at his country home in Isonya Ogboijebu, Ogun State, on Saturday. The funeral service at the St. Philip's Anglican Church in the town was witnessed by family members, friends, and top politicians, including former President Olusegun Obasanjo, governors of Ogun, Lagos, and Oyo states, among others. Arise News chief correspondent Tokumbo Oyetunji was there and filed this report.
Small town of Isonya Ogboijebu in Ogun State, when one of his prominent sons, Samuel Ayodele Adebanjo, a great ambassador of the community, is being laid to rest. He was a leading member of the congregation here at the St. Philip's Anglican Church, and time to bid him a final farewell is a special moment as a large crowd of dignitaries joins in for the funeral service. The life and times of the late Afenifere leader, especially his outstanding qualities of service to his people, country, and God, form the focus of the preaching by Bishop Michael Fakwe, the Bishop of Remo and the Archbishop of the Ecclesiastical Province of Lagos. It is the final day of a week-long funeral program for a man admired by many for his courage of conviction, who remained committed to the political ideology that preaches true federalism, equity, free education, and social welfare. More words of tribute continue to flow not only from the pulpit on this day, but from far away Niger State, where a former military leader has sent in some soothing words on the character of the man, Ayo Adebanjo.
We all give the glory to God for a life well lived. The entire family has to take solace in the fact that he has gone to be with his Creator. There is a time for everything, every living thing under the sun.
Baba's passing marks the end of an era, but his legacy will continue to shape Nigeria's democratic evolution and federalist ideals.
We pray for Mama in her old age as well. No matter for how long she lives, over the children she will not mourn.
He was an elder statesman, a man that meant different things to different people. You can say it was controversial, you can say it was difficult, but you also will know that he loves the country. He was a man that God has also blessed with a lot of wisdom, and he has a width, to stand it. And so we thank God for his life.
His legacies will endure forever. Ayo Adebanjo is man of many parts. He's a humanist. He's one who has come, he conquered. He's one who has integrity in all that he does.
A family and community so proud of their illustrious father and son that they celebrate his life even in transition as the body is transferred into the mausoleum right inside the Adebanjo family compound for a private interment.
We're going to miss him terribly, and as his epitaph says, it is difficult to forget somebody who gave you so much. It's going to be impossible to forget because he had such a massive impact on all our lives, both as a private personal family and his extended Nigerian family, which went across all tribes. You always say there's nothing as good as a good name. No amount of assets he can leave you can be as valuable as a good name. And he left us an incredibly good name. So for that, Dad, I'm very grateful.
Some tributes from a son to a titan father who, though, has now bowed out at 96, but words that capture his worldview and ideology are boldly inscribed on the walls of his permanent resting place to serve as a reminder for anyone visiting at any time about his consistency of ideas and beliefs while he sojourned here. Tokunbo Oyetunji, Arise News, Ogbo-Ijebu.
Well, may his soul rest in peace, and may his legacy live on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that when we're talking about the death and the passing on of people who have contributed so much to nation building, that is quite literally one of the most important tenets of that, their legacy. How will you be remembered? What type of improvement have you brought to the lives of the people you impacted, the paths you crossed while you were still alive? And I can imagine that many people would agree that Pa Ayo Adebanjo, proud son of the soil, is someone that did a lot, not just for the Yoruba culture and Yoruba people, but indeed for the nation building for all of us. So I know that he will continue to be sorely missed, and Tokunbo did a great job of really encompassing the final bit of what has been a week-long celebration of life for him, and of course the final burial rites. So we do extend our deepest condolences to the Adebanjo family, and of course, we continue to pray that he rests in peace. Going to one of the other stories that we discussed, that you read, Vin, by looking at the comments from Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, who is the outgoing president of the African Development Bank. And it seems that his comments have rattled or rustled a few feathers in the presidency. I mean, first and foremost, Akinwumi Adesina's economic judgment is something that I think many people would trust. And I think that when we're looking at comparisons of experience, it is wise to look at things in nominal terms, but also in real terms. So we can go back and forth about the numbers. Adesina says that in 1960, this was what our GDP per capita was, some $1,800, and comparing it to now just being $800 in the presidency through Mr. Bayo Ononuga saying that, well, that's actually not accurate, that perhaps it was closer to $100. Whatever the case may be, I think what we really need to do is focus on different types of metrics. And so, yes, we can look at things through nominal and real terms, but also if we could ask people who were alive during that time and still alive today what their actual lived experiences was. I think that there is also a lot of value in hearing what people have to say, because we can talk about numbers until the end of time. I think that what people actually experienced, what they remembered, is also very important. And when you look at 1960, was just a teeny weeny bit before my time. But it is the generation of which my parents grew up in. My parents are actually, especially my mother, she's actually a child of independence. She was born 9 days after independence, actually. And I think that many people would say, well, actually, when you look at their early years, the 1960s and the 1970s, the quality of life they lived back then is far greater than what they see in the streets of Nigeria today. So I do think that, yeah, well, you can describe and you can dispute the numbers. I do think that what Akinwumi Adesina is something that many people would agree with. What he said was something that many people would agree with.
I like to deal with facts. Okay. As regards the numbers, Bayo Onanuga was correct. I deal with facts only. Nigeria's GDP was nowhere near over 1,800 and something in 1960. In fact, it was way low, about $93 to about $100 it was then, because the GDP size was small, because it was really agrarian economy. It was when oil started to ship in, and which oil crescendoed in the 70s when the Yom Kippur War happened and crude oil price rose from $3 to $12 per barrel. The GDP started to shoot up. Then in the 70s, we had the cement armada. Then in the 80s, it went to a new height where the GDP, ballooned, and it was over 1,000, 800 in the early 80s. But then we started to have economic problems. Oil prices slumped, and it went down. Again, the 90s were very terrible years for Nigeria. Then we picked up again under Obasanjo, the PDP years, 2014, 3,200. Then we went back to where we are again today. So on that score, he's right. But on the score that Onanuga is wrong is this. The lived-in experiences were a whole lot better back then than now. The parameters of what Nigeria was like in the 80s, 70s, 80s was a whole lot better. Take, for instance, let's take healthcare. He said GDP, you shouldn't score a nation by GDP, let's score a nation by other parameters. Let's take healthcare. As at the 70s in this country, we had a UCH in Ibadan that was voted the 5th best in the Commonwealth. Many sources, many people have reported, in fact, Ben Moribus have been quoted to say that the Saudi royal family will come and get their healthcare. We had a formidable UCH. In fact, a doctor was seated on that seat you were sitting. He's a doctor of one of the big hospitals in Lagos today. He said families used to come back from Canada to come and get their healthcare in Nigeria. The economy was buoyant. Gowon once said, the problem is not money, but how to spend it. There was that talk. We hosted Festac in 77. Those were the days where you had, in fact, I still saw a newspaper asleep where they said there will be power interruptions from 5 o'clock to like 10 o'clock. Those were the times they announced when they're going to take power. And people will tell you that they moderately had power. You can argue that, maybe the population was not as much, but there was a lot of order in the Nigerian system. Leading up to the 80s, where things were still stable, 82, 83, things started to go down. After the 83 elections, things had gone down, and we saw the resurgence of the military. When you look at the indices 40 years ago, if you were to benchmark with today, things were a lot better. The lived-in experiences were a lot better. Prior to independence, Nigeria had over 3,500 kilometers of rail. Today, how many kilometers more have we added to it? What has been the infrastructure? Till today, how many thousand kilometers of road do we have? Do we have over 300,000 kilometers of road? What has been the add-on to the progress? Have we not squandered our riches and our progress? Mr. Bayo Onanuga is talking. The World Bank, where we're at the IMF summit, they put out a report that they said rural poverty is increasing. And this parameter, over 70% rural poverty. If you go back, anecdotal evidence, go back to Nollywood movies back in the days, you will see when a man has lost his old fortunes, he will say, I'll go back to the village. And he knows he can't be hungry in the village. See, there's a lot of poverty there. Insecurity cannot make people move around. Does you want to compare the insecurity threshold today? Look at what happened in Yobe. Military equipment ransacked, soldiers. Oh, God bless our valiant soldiers that lost their life. My commiserations to them. There's an attendant risk of Boko Haram being back. The state of play is at an all-time low. We have devalued our economy and devalued the lives and the prospects of the people as we speak today. So other parameters are bad. And he needs to realize this. So yes, the president of the AFDB might not have gotten it on the score, the right score will have been, when you compare the GDP threshold to the early 80s to now, it's a whole lot better than now. But we have creamed away all the successes we made in 2014, and we have gone back. And now we are not even where we used to be about 40 years ago. And that's a sad reality. And what does that smirk of? Bad leadership across board. And those are the things, God rest his soul, Ayo Adebanjo was talking about. And his solution to them was a federalist state where you devolve power. Because it was said, and there's a nostalgic feeling, that the good old days of Nigeria were the days where you actually had the regions, and the regions worked effectively. You had the northern region, the western region, the eastern region, and you had the Midwest. And that's where you had the likes of free education, where Awolowo spent 1/3 of his budget. Yemi Ogunbi is writing a book to come out now about the days of Awolowo. And he spent 1/3 of his budget on free education, which was qualitative across board. So when you ask me for their lived experiences, things were a whole lot better. The quality and the standards were a whole lot better. But what we are saying is we want this country to grow. And if APC, this government grows this country, we'll celebrate them. But if they don't, we'll speak about it.
Right. Well, there's a lot said this morning. Unfortunately, I wasn't born yet in the 60s, but thank God for data. And I love that Adefemi touched on the fact that when we speak of economic data, there's real numbers and there are nominal numbers. Yes, if we look at the nominal numbers, the GDP per capita was indeed $93 in 1960. Compared to $800 and something that it is today. However, if we look at the real value of that, the real value of that $93 is about $1,000 in today's economy. Of course, you factor in inflation, you factor in so many things. So truly, if we are to unpack this from an economic perspective, the numbers do show you that in real terms, GDP per capita, households had more income coming into their homes in 1960 than they do now. Now, is that an indictment on the current government? That's debatable, but I think it's also important for us to contextualize what has happened in Nigeria since 1960. We've had several coups, we've had several changes in administration, there's even been a civil war in there. So I don't think it was necessary for the presidency to come this hard at this fact, because the truth is that the journey of a nation is non-linear. So many things have happened. Rufai has documented some of them, and many of those would erode income for some time. So I think it's really important for us to focus on how we can rebuild the GDP per capita and move forward. Another major thing that wasn't mentioned that happened since 1960 is that there was a major population growth. Now, you need to remember, Economics 101 says that GDP per capita is simply your GDP divided by your population. So we can't neglect the fact that that massive population growth from 40 million, now we're over 200 million, it certainly will make an impact on the numbers. That's why I always like to focus on the GNI index, the measure of inequality, the distribution of wealth. It certainly gives a bigger picture of what was happening. And those who lived in the 1960s will tell you that the level of inequality was certainly not as high and accentuated as it is today. There was the agricultural revolution. There were so many functioning industries. But why? We have to ask ourselves. We have to remember that the colonial legacy was at play. And this is why we always have to remember where we stand when it comes to issues concerning neocolonialism, because ultimately neocolonialism is what's contributing to the failure of our leadership. We were handed over something that we are now unable to manage because we have not made it our own. We still continue to try and copy and paste these colonial economic models which are not serving the people. Now, very quickly, I'd also just like to touch on the issue of electricity. It is very welcome news that the federal government will be engaging the GenCos to ensure that that debt is eroded. However, again, this is all about culture. Excuse me. This is all about our strategy. This is all about how we manage our finances. Because yes, this debt is not just attributed to this administration. It's a legacy debt. But how does a government fail to pay its electricity bills to the point that it gets to the point where the GenCos are saying we will cut the nation off, we can't operate, and rightfully so. And so for me, there's a mismatch in priorities if we say that we now need to shift towards cost-reflective data when it's clear that the federal government's debt is actually one of the major burdens on our electricity infrastructure. I close with a statement from Professor Lumumba the other day when he was speaking about development. He said, development is not possible without discipline. We've had our debts cancelled before in this country. Look at where we are now. So yes, it's a good step that we're engaging the GENCOs to clear this debt. However, discipline and how that power and the power bills are managed in the future is paramount.